Hello there, vinyl community. Um, so I guess the title's a little bit of a misnomer, clickbait, I guess. The proto-punk, secret proto-punk history of Bob Seger. I think most people know Bob Seger from those, you know, if I may, those horrible 1970s ballads that he's so well known for, and kept they're very lucrative for Seeger, and he certainly found the path that he wanted to stay on, and he stayed on it. So that doesn't mean it's good music, and I don't think that it is. If you like it, that's cool, and nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a whole nother section of Seeger's career that a lot of people don't even know about, especially people who don't. I live in the Detroit area. I think we're a little more exposed to some of that early stuff. Although Bob Seger and his management has basically, disowned that whole early section of his career, which is a shame because it's the best music he ever made, and yeah, it's just the way it is. Um, Bob Seger started off as early as 1966 and did a number of singles as Bob Seger and the Herd. These were pretty tough singles to get for a long time. You either had to find the singles, or there were a couple of kind of bootleg compilations, one of which I have right here. Um, this is called Michigan Nuggets, and this was a little bootleg that came out in the 70s, and it pulled together, it's not just Bob Seger, it's a bunch of Michigan and Detroit bands, if you can get a look at that. But it does pull together a good percentage of those early Bob Seger and the Herd tracks. I think the one that maybe most people would know would be East Side Story, which is a fantastic garage rock, garage, early psychedelic, but with more of an emphasis on when Bob did garage and flavored it with some psychedelia. He also always wanted to be a soul singer, so it's flavored with a lot of that great kind of Motown soul has always been mixed into his music, even from the very beginning. But Bob was a more than capable soul singer. It's a cool little boot. It's on this. If you're from the Michigan area, you'll get the joke on Belvedere Records. Mr. Belvedere was a local sales guy who always had "we do good." His saying was always "we do good work," and I can remember as a little boy seeing those commercials on TV. Anyway, little backstory on this particular bootleg: when it came out, Bob Seger's management, a guy named Punch Andrews, was furious about it and did everything he could to kind of track down copies of this. There were two printings of it, from what I understand. The early ones had a limited edition 1,000, and then they did do another 1,000, but without the. And that's pretty good source because I guess the guy who actually did this bootleg actually has written about it and said that cool compilation. In addition to the Seger stuff, the early Seger, you had the early MC5 singles that were hard to get, the Underdogs, Terry Knight and the Pack, the Human Beings, the Rationals, Question Mark and the Mysterians, the Wanted, Rationals, MC5. Really kind of a cool comp. Ironically, it shows Iggy on the cover of this. Ironically, there are no Stooges or Iggy singles on this whatsoever. But if you come by this, for a long time, this was the easiest way to grab those Bob Seger and the Herd tracks, those early garage rock tracks that really, that I guess I was describing in the title as kind of proto-punk. I'm not sure they're really proto-punk, but they're a lot closer than he would ever get at other places in his career. So cool little compilation. After that was on the Cameo Parkway label. Bob leaves that label in 67, 68, and then he leaves the herd behind and becomes the Bob Seger System. And these early Bob Seger System albums, a couple of them have been reissued. I don't think Mongrel has been, which is probably maybe his best full-length album. This is the album that has the fantastic track Lucifer on it. And if you haven't heard Bob Seger and the System's Lucifer, it is a garage rock classic, man. Greatest, maybe the single greatest track he's ever done. Really, really good stuff. And this is a pretty strong album too, full of gritty rock and roll garage sound to it, flavored with the kind of like soul music that he always kind of gravitated to. But fantastic record, and well worth these early. So this is like 68, 69 when these Bob Seger System albums came out. And as the gate rolled, they didn't really do much commercially. The singles were successful in the Detroit area, but other than that, they really didn't get much play. Another good one is this one, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, and this has 2+2, which is another fantastic garage rock track. If you haven't heard Bob Seger and the System's 2+2, and all you're familiar with is Night Moves and Main Street and those all those tracks that Seger's known for, go find 2+2 on YouTube, and you'll get a whole different perspective of what Bob Seger was really all about. And I guess that's why I wanted to do this, is to kind of show that there's another part of this talented guy who he unfortunately completely rejects. And I even had a chance one time to speak briefly to Punch Andrews. I think I might have mentioned it in another video. And I asked him about these early, at the time CDs were really big, and I said, why haven't you issued the early Bob Seger albums on CD? And his response was, nobody wants to hear that shit. That was it. And so yeah, these are getting pretty tough to find. At one time, these were in the Detroit area. They were pretty easy to find, but I don't see them much anymore. You just don't see them in the bins. I think people are starting to grab them as they realize what really good material is on some of these early albums. So then eventually Seger leaves Bob Seger System behind, and then just starts operating under the Bob Seger as a kind of moniker. And then eventually he would go on to form Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, which is what most people kind of know him for. But anyway, there are a couple good records that he put out as just Bob Seger. This one, which is Smoking OPs, which is smoking other people's songs, and most of the tracks on here are covers, but it does include the fantastic Heavy Music, which is another great early Seger song. This version of it isn't the best one. The best one is on Cameo Parkway. Still really good. And there's some tracks on here that are worth Let It Rock. There's still some Bo Diddley, pretty good track, and still worthwhile if you like that early garage sound, flavored with a bit of soul music. Worth hearing, and I think an important part of the Detroit music scene, along with the MC5 and the Stooges and the Amboy Dukes. These early Seger records, he was part of all of that, and really cool stuff. And then one more album that I'd say worth mentioning if you're going back and looking for early Seger albums, and maybe one of the hardest ones to find is back in '72. And this is getting away from the garage rock sound a little bit and going for more of a straight rock and soul sound that he would become more famous for. But it's still good and it's still worthwhile. And this has the song Rosalie, which would be given to Thin Lizzy. And back in '72 is a great song. I've Been Working, which is a Van Morrison song, and Midnight Rider. So it's still a pretty good record, and some people even consider this his strongest of these albums. They consider this the strongest. I consider this a little bit more straightforward, and maybe that's what people like about it, but still worthy and still worthwhile if you're trying to get a comprehensive look at that early Seger stuff. And after that, there's really not much worth mentioning in the man's career, as far as I'm concerned. And your mileage may differ, and that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But I'd say the last album with anything worthwhile on it was when it becomes Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and they released an album, Live Bullet. I guess I like this album mainly out of, a sense of nostalgia. I heard this a lot when I was very young. I used to have a neighbor who lived across the street from my parents' house, and there was a young girl, and she would put the speakers of her stereo in the window of her bedroom, and she would go out and wash her car in a bikini, but that's another story. And wash her car, and I used to sit across the street as a little boy and listen to the music, and she'd play this record over and over and over again, so a certain amount of nostalgia comes from this. But Bob Seger and the band are still pretty hot as far as a live rock and roll band, and it's full of really rockin' tracks, and you can't take away from Seger. This is not a sellout, but this was his first big selling album, and then after that, it's just all downhill. If you don't like that more ballady, saccharine AOR material that he would become much more known for. And I stumbled upon these records. I remember being a teenager, and I had a friend who had an older brother who left his records. They had his bedroom, and all of his records and his stereo and everything were in there. And we used to go in there and pillage his records because I think he was away at school or something. And that's when I found, first time ever discovered, these records, and they were like Bob Seger records I never saw before or never heard before. And so we would pillage them and go listen to them, and decided that there was really something to it, that there was a grittiness and almost, like I say, almost kind of a punk or proto-punk attitude about them, where Seger was kind of unafraid to be raw and rockin' in a way that I think he later in his career really shied away from, and maybe even it just completely rejects, which is kind of weird. But I guess that's how the man feels, and what are you going to do about it? So for some of this stuff, there is the Bob Seger and the Herd stuff did get an eventual release, and there's a pretty handy compilation out there that you can get most of those early singles on now, and it's relatively cheap, $30, $35, something like that, and definitely worth tracking down. Some of the other early albums won't be so easy to track down. A few of them have gotten released, like Smokin' OPs, I think eventually did get a re-release in more recent years. But anyway, I think it's a little area of Detroit rock and roll, and that really gets overlooked because people don't even know that those albums are out. I know I've played for friends of mine who were from Europe or from other places, and when they heard those early Seger songs, they couldn't believe that that was Bob Seger, because it was this wild, psychedelic, fuzz-driven guitar with these really raw, soulful vocals, and just something that he didn't become very well known for later on. So there's my secret proto-punk history of Bob Seger. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope it turned you on to some music if you're inclined towards that kind of garage rock type stuff. And I know for sure there's some material there that you'll really enjoy. So, all right, everyone, thanks. Have a good day.